Next, let's look at three closely related features: the plus operator, array basics, and command line arguments. For the plus operator, if the thing on both the left and the right are numbers, so 2.3 and 4.5 are numbers, or more specifically, they're doubles, double precision floating point numbers, then plus means addition. This is not surprising, and this is what you would expect. But in Java, plus can also mean string concatenation. So in these later two examples, one or both of the things on the left or the right of the plus sign are strings, and so plus does not mean addition, it means string concatenation. So result 1 is hello world, a single big string, and result 2 is number 5, a single big string. In some languages, in C++ in particular, operators can be overloaded extensively. In Java, however, plus is the only built-in overloaded operator, and you cannot define your own operators in Java. Okay, arrays. Arrays are sequential sets of data, and the way that you declare an array is to use square brackets. Int in Java means a whole number, so this means that the variable nums is an array, a sequential set of whole numbers. The way that you list the values, or at least the simplest way to list the values, are separated by commas inside curly braces. And Java, like most modern languages, is zero-based. That means entry number 0 is 2. Entry number 1 is 4. Entry number 2 is 6. Entry number 3 is 8. If you try to access entry number 4, you get an error message. If there are 5 things in your array, then the indices are 0 through 4. The main method, as we saw before, was declared as string square bracket. That means an array of strings. And so main is automatically passed an array of strings representing the command line arguments, whatever you typed in when you executed the program. So for example, args sub 0 is the first command line argument. Arg sub 1 is the second command line argument, and so forth. And again, trying to read off the end of the array is an error. And so if there are 2 command line arguments passed in, if you try to access args sub 2, which is the third entry, then you get an error message. So in Java, anytime you have an array, you can always ask how big it is. You don't have to actually have created the array to be able to query and find out how big it is. And there is a property called length. So suppose I made an array of strings containing John and Jane and Juan. Now in this case, I made the array, so I know that there's 3 entries. The indices are 0, 1, and 2. But suppose I pass that array to another function, to another method. That other method might not know how big the array is, but it can always ask by accessing the length property. Notice that the length property is 1 bigger than the largest index. So the length is 3, which means the indices are 0, 1, and 2. So for command line arguments, it gets passed an array of strings. You can declare that variable, for example, args. And so args.length tells you how many command line arguments there are. If you're familiar with C or C++, in C and C++, the system automatically passes in the name of the program as one of the command line arguments. Java does not do that. So in general, command line arguments are useful for beginning practice, but are not useful for real-life applications. In real-life applications, you should pop up a user interface to collect the input. But just for practice at the beginning, command line arguments are somewhat useful. Command line arguments are also occasionally used for behind-the-scenes scripts. For example, when you start an application server, there might be a script that passes it some command line arguments that you can change. But anyway, when you're first learning and practicing, you might deal with command line arguments, but you're unlikely to use them very much or at all in real life. Unfortunately, Eclipse has very poor support for command line arguments. It's basically more trouble than it's worth to tell Eclipse to pass in command line arguments. So if you want to use command line arguments, just give up on using Eclipse and instead pop up a command window as we did before. Type in Java, type in the name of the class, and run the command line arguments. Okay, so here's an example. Here is a program that declares the name of the variable args. So that's the array of strings that's passed in. And it prints out the first argument, and the second argument. This sounds reasonable, but of course, if you've done much programming in other languages, you can see right away that this is wrong. And the reason it's wrong is that you don't check that there are at least 2 command line arguments before you try to print them out. So let's try running this. So I type Java show to args A, B. And as I expected, it prints out A and B. But if I type in Java show to args and I just provide A, I get an error message. This is bad. You should always assume that the end user will supply data that you didn't expect or fail to supply the data that you did expect. So my program is fundamentally wrong. It tries to print out 2 command line arguments without first verifying that there are 2 command line arguments. So we haven't discussed if statements yet, but we'll discuss them shortly, and I think that you can get the basic idea of if statements from this example, even though we haven't discussed the syntax. So what I should have done is something like this. I should have said if args.length is greater or equal to 2, then print out the command line arguments. Otherwise, print out, sorry, less than 2 args. Okay, I saved that. It compiled it automatically, so now let's go back and try it again. I'll type in Java show to args AB. Got the same result as before, but now when I supply only 1 argument, instead of it crashing with a Java error message, it prints out the custom message that my program supplied.